Guys, we are coming to you live post-game reaction show. Last one of the year. Seahawks defeating the Rams 30-25 and helping us break it all down and get into some off-season talk too is a good friend of the show, Dan Viens. Dan, appreciate you coming on here and getting ready to chop up the last game and take some comments and just enjoy this one here.
Yeah, it's always good to be on with you guys, especially after a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And, guys, just everybody that's been supporting the channel. We've been HawksZone's been around for about a year now. So, a new channel to the family here of Seahawks podcasts. And we hit 1K today. So it's a milestone for us. And again, we appreciate everybody who's been supporting the channel throughout. There's going to be some cool stuff happening in 2025. So appreciate everyone supporting the channel throughout. And Dan, we got a big thanks to you too, man, because you know what, you've been a big supporter for us early on and continue to support us in a big way. So we can't say enough for your support. We really appreciate that too.
Always. Here's a little bit here. This is for you guys. Been trying to get you to that 1,000 for a while. I think it was the hat that got us over.
I think the hat got us over there.
Might be the hat.
Yeah.
Dan's rocking the dad hat, guys. It's a good look, and
love this thing.
Head down to the store, and pick one up. But
congrats,
guys, and anybody who's been on the channel right now and haven't subbed to the channel, go ahead, go down there, hit the sub button, and like the video, share the video. It helps out the channel a lot. So, guys, Bryce, we'll get you got anything to say before we start breaking in? You want to add something to it, or?
Honestly, guys, I just really want to say thank you so much for, and Dan as well, and the other podcasters and content creators we've had on to help us get to 1,000. It's a big milestone for us, and it's going to open a lot of doors for us with stuff we can do with this channel, with this show. And so, yeah, today we'll be doing a giveaway based on how active everybody is in the chat today. So make sure you guys are active in it, commenting, make your presence known, because we will be doing a giveaway for some of the HawksZone Rundown gear. Maybe you'll get one of the 3 cool hats we're all wearing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, flood the comment section in, get them in now, because we're gonna have some fun with Q&As here, especially a lot to talk about, not just this game, but looking ahead to the future and getting ready for off-season mode here right now. So, we're gonna break it all down on the other side.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. This run.
Get off me!
DK. Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got a lead. Leo Washington.
Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. The Seahawks are going to hold the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does. Is it going to be another 9-8?
Players who got to finish in Seattle.
They have to fix the offensive
Part of his success and part of the
ambition of being the LOB
One a year, that's trading DK Metcalf.
Play him aggressive.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
All right, guys, welcome back. So Seahawks 30-25, proven to 10-7. So 1 win better the last couple seasons. So it's a nice way for the guys to go out and playing some backups today. But it was a matter of coming out, playing hard, finishing the season strong, just taking something and going to the offseason, building it. Dan, what's your takeaway from this game, and just overall feeling of this season as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, as most seasons are, but I'm just trying to focus on the big picture here. 10 wins is not easy to achieve. It's only the second time in Seahawks history that they've won 10 games and not made the playoffs. First time ever that a first-year head coach has won 10 games. I was looking at it a little closer, and when you kind of inspect how this season came together and the journey that it took, things really seemed to click right around the bye week, right? They acquire Ernest Jones. We saw a glimpse of what it could be heading into the bye week. And then it really came together. 6-2 after the bye. And I did the math. Their last 4 losses of the season were to teams that are combined. What's the combined record? It's an average record of 12-5. Our last 4 losses are to teams that average 12-5. They have a 72% winning percentage, and we were 6-2 after the bye. They clearly found some things. And as much as people want to nitpick things, and there's, the sky is falling and nothing's ever good enough. This is a team that feels like at the end of the season, it was a better team than at the beginning of the season. It was a team that was coming together and ascending and getting better in just about every aspect, regardless of the things that we can nitpick and criticize. And we'll certainly do that over the next 6 months. And I felt like that was the tone after the game today too, from McDonald and the players that spoke as well, especially from Geno Smith. Just felt a little bit like, I know we've talked about this a lot on the show in the past, a little bit like 2011-12, they lost that playoff game to the Falcons, right? In Russ's rookie year, and then coming off the field, all of the tone and the language was about what's next and what we're building. And that's where I feel like we are. And as frustrating as it is to miss the playoffs, I think back to where I wanted us to be at the beginning of the season, and this is what I asked for. And here we are, and we're feeling disappointed because we're not in the playoffs. But you have to consider this a successful year.
Yeah, I don't know today's game. So like, obviously we'll dive into this Rams Seahawks victory over the Rams. But the thing that worried me about this is the score of the game. We're talking about a team where we played all of our starters and they basically played a majority of their backups. And we let Jimmy Garoppolo and this Rams team hang around. And those are concerns for me with this team. And it's great. We finished 7-1 on the road, which is ridiculous for a team that's not going to the playoffs to have that type of winning record on the road. There's things on this team that need to be fixed. And the offense is one of them. And I was not impressed today with the offensive performance. Like, me and Griff Sturgeon were going back and forth about how the play action game still hasn't been developed, and we're in week 18. We're still doing the same concept all the time, and teams know it. I think it was the second drive of the game. Geno almost gets crushed. He has to avoid, then he takes a sack because the play action got blown up before he even could get set after faking the ball. There were just things in this game where I looked at it and I went, okay, there are still huge issues with this offense. I hope in the next 48 hours we find out that there's maybe potentially a change coming. I don't know if there will be, which is concerning. And then I don't know if you heard it, Dan or Ryan, but 710 does their pregame show, and John Schneider came on and he made a comment. And to me, this comment was really concerning, which was, I think it was along the lines of the offensive line. And he basically said, oh yeah, well, we're looking to the 2025 draft and, draft guys to fill that. We're draft and develop. And I'm like, no, you're not, because you haven't done it. You've never really developed anybody. You can say Charles Cross, you could say maybe Abe Lucas, but those guys came in pretty established from where they were in college.
Yeah.
You have got to go with a different mentality. Like John Schneider, you're great at making trades and draft and, getting vets in here and them working. Quandre Diggs, Leonard Williams, Ernest Jones. Take that approach now to the offensive line. Go get some talent. But again, I think it's a good stepping stone to finish 10-7 going into this offseason, so you have something positive to build off of. But this team, in my opinion, with those losses to the Giants, the Rams earlier one, the Vikings game, those are things that are just stuck in my side of games we should have won, and we completely gave them away.
Yeah, that's the only thing I'm a little concerned about. Yeah, I'm not sure where you fall right now in Ryan Grubb, but that's the only thing when people have a short memory and you throw up 30, no matter who it's against, and things are feeling good and you got 10 wins. Do you keep them around for another season? So offense is definitely a concern. And that, Bryce, the point you brought up with John Schneider and coming on 710 there, and that's what we've kind of spoken about the last couple of weeks is what are we really going to expect from John Schneider, right? I mean, are we expecting this big, huge change on the offensive line, or is it, I'm going to get a young guy in the draft, maybe a veteran guard, but not maybe to the level we're expecting, and just status quo where he can plug and play a few pieces, and we got to 10 wins this year. Now we can get to 11-12 as a mentality. And kind of not maybe makes as many drastic changes on the offense that maybe we think should happen. Dan, what's your take? Because I agreed with you about the defense. I mean, as soon as Ernest Jones came in after the bye, it felt like Mike knew what he wants, right? 2 linebackers out the door. Here's Ernest, Knight's developing, and you're like, okay, we kind of get it. Mike knows exactly what he wants. We can build on that in the offseason. we'll probably add some pieces, maybe subtract some pieces. You're feeling confident on that side of the ball. Offense, not so much. And now with, say, John's comments, where do you stand with this offense? Do you see it where John's just kind of going to be John Schneider, what we've seen, and, make some moves, but nothing, not some massive free agent splash at the guard position. It for me, it's tough to see it, especially, we talk about the comment he made about the overpaying guards. How you see that playing out on the offensive side of the ball? Are you kind of seeing just little things here and there, or do you see John really mixing it up?
Wasn't surprised by his pregame comments. He's not going to change his MO and his beliefs and his philosophy. And I think what he was saying there is, I mean, they certainly do use free agency. They signed 13, 14 free agents last year. And it was generally, it's pretty easy to look at that entire class as a whole and say it was a miss for the most part. I think he was talking about how they don't really make a lot of splashy moves. Draymond Jones was kind of the exception there. A multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract. I don't know. I'm a little more optimistic on this front in this respect. I think continuity is really important when you talk about the offensive line. You can't just flush the whole group out and start over. No. That's what a lot of fans think we need to do. I see a lot of that type of tone and language being used, that you keep Charles Cross, get rid of the rest of them. So you're talking about getting rid of 5, 6, 7 draft picks from the last 3 drafts, that kind of investment, just giving up on those guys. Players do develop on their own timelines. And I thought that offensive line played a lot better near the end of the season than it did at the beginning of the season. Certainly. I even thought, I was a little concerned when they decided to go with Mike Jarrell at right tackle today, because Lucas couldn't go instead of Stone Forsythe because of his pass protection issues. I thought he was okay. They only gave up 3 sacks on the day, or 2 sacks, both of them in the first half. And both of them, I think you can, were pretty easy to pinpoint on one player. And it was just that they lost their rep immediately. Right. I thought for the most part, they did okay. You got to go out and get better there. But I think you can do it with shrewd, smart moves. You don't necessarily need to bust out the checkbook and go make the splashy moves. That's not necessarily the only way that you can get this offensive line to where they need to be, because I thought they were closer at the end of the year than they were at the beginning. And even today, there were some things that drove me crazy about Ryan Grubb. They're running the football pretty well. They had a 3rd and 1 at one point. He ends up trying to throw the football. I just don't get that. Lean, you finally have it going for you. Let's lean into that identity a little bit. But yet I did see more under center. I did see, and I was looking anytime they were under center, because Bryce and I have talked a lot about this the last couple of weeks. And to Griffin's point, I was looking for I saw at least one strong side fake on a play action. So at least maybe they're getting through to Grubb a little bit, right? But I thought the red zone play calling was better today, obviously, because Gino had his first 4-touchdown game of his career. I thought guys were schemed open a little bit better. And Gino seemed more decisive in there, which to me spoke to a confidence that he had in the plan. And so, look, I don't think after the last 48 hours, just listening to Mike McDonald talk behind the podium before they flew to LA, the fact the team put Ryan Grubb behind the podium this week, they don't take those assignments lightly. They don't just throw. If they were planning on making a move, I don't know that they would hang him out to dry like that. I don't think they're going to make a change. They aren't talking like they are. But then I remember, and Bryson, you and I talked about this just a couple of days ago. Bert Cold was there today, post game, sitting in the second row, which he doesn't always go on the road with the team. And the last time he did, he fired Pete Carroll a few days later. But if people don't recognize that name, he's a very high-ranking official in the First and Goal, the Vulture. What do they call that company now? I don't even know.
Oh, Vulcan.
Yeah, Vulcan. That's it. But also I remember Pete, one day before they fired Brian Schottenheimer, talking about, in response to a reporter's question, that he was offended at the suggestion that they might make a change there. So don't know what's going to happen, but it sure doesn't seem like they're going to make a move. I think this is an organization and team that believes in the path they're on. They're frustrated by how this season went. They should have been in the playoffs, but they think they're on the right track, and they're not going to veer off course. They're not going to go blow up their philosophy over, a couple of games that didn't go their way. I think they're going to stick to the plan, and they believe that they're closer to contending than they are to having to rebuild it.
I just look at the Grubb situation. There's two coordinators that pop into mind. One Dan is Brian Schottenheimer, who we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
The other one's Jeremy Bates. And when Pete Carroll and that philosophy didn't jive, he was gone, one and done. Every other Seahawks coordinator's kind of had at least three seasons when they've still at least fit the philosophy to an extent of the coach. Like I look at Bevel and what he did with, Marshawn and our, Legion of Boom Day team. He fit the MO a bit, run the ball, play action, so on. There are so many philosophy differences, I feel, in the Seahawks defense to their offense and what they want to do. Like, we're not built to be a flashy shootout team because our defense can actually play, sound defense consistently. They need to get some depth, which we saw, I think, get exposed a little bit today. But when I look at, Brian Schottenheimer, but when I look at when Brian Schottenheimer was here, his calling card and his issue was when he tried to go to more of what the Russ camp seemed like they wanted to do, which was bomb away. And he kind of got away from the run game a little bit because there were years there, those first 2 seasons at least, where our run game and everything was working and we had play action and we could do things with Chris Carson and, the whole, Mike Apati and, Mike Solari in there. I look at Grubb and I look at just such a philosophical issue. He came in trying to do the same thing he did at Washington, which, it worked at Washington, it worked at college. But the thing that still stuck for me that he said at the podium this week, and I think you and me did talk about it, when he said about how he wanted to attack defenses. And he said it to the terms of, I think someone asked him, have you changed or what have you learned and grown from? And he's like, well, I haven't really, but my understanding of you have to attack scheme and structure and the defensive families that way more than just players. In college, you can attack the crap out of a bad player on a team because it's hard to find another guy to come in and you can just go at it.
Yeah.
In the NFL, your 4th string was a starter on his college team. Like we'll talk about Josh Jobe. He started at Alabama, but he's our 3rd string, rotational in corner. When I hear an OC say that, I see a guy that doesn't understand yet. And this is the problem. We're not a Jacksonville Jaguars where no one's expecting anything here. We're expecting to be a playoff team. You can't be having a coach come in and be on training wheels trying to figure his way through the process. If we had seen some growth from this offense down the stretch here instead of regression, I think there's more of a statement to keep Ryan Grubb. The fact we saw such a regression over the second half of the season, even after that bye week, shows me just that it may not ever click. And do we want to spend another half a season and fire him halfway through next season because we didn't do it in the offseason when we had a chance to move on and start that process and move forward? And I'm more interested in having potentially Jake Peets, if that's the guy that they tag, to keep some familiarity. I think he's going to bring some of what the Rams do well, which their play action game today with Jimmy Garoppolo looked a hell of a lot better than ours does.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting watching the Rams today because we knew that Mike LaFleur was calling plays and not Sean McVay. And McFleur is a guy that would be a hot candidate on the offensive coordinator, coaching market if he were allowed to leave, though. Although I suspect the reason McVay lets him do that, it's the second time he's let LaFleur do that in a meaningless game at the end of the year. It allows them to then block any lateral move because they can say that he's going to be the play caller. We saw that happen with Mike Kafka, obviously, last year. But I thought it was interesting, too, because, you talk about how it was disappointing they gave up 300 yards passing to Jimmy Garoppolo today, and the offense was mostly backups. The defense played most of their starters, although some of them only played in certain obvious, like Jared Verse seemed to only play in Braden Fisk and, third downs and passing situations. But I thought, that's a challenge going up against a guy you don't have any tape on. You don't know what Mike LaFleur's tendencies are going to be when you know Sean McVay so well. And I thought most of that yardage from Garoppolo came on the fact that they just found, the weak link, and that was our ability they were just throwing screens. I mean, it was just tight end drags and screen passes the whole second half. And I think that's something that Mike McDonald kind of bases his scheme around allowing in some sense. Like he'll give up that stuff because he knows he's going to get you into a 3rd and long eventually and get you off the field, be able to turn up some of those pressure packages and stop you, in the red zone. So I wasn't as concerned with that. Just speaking about the game specifically, I thought it had a chance in the first half to be a blowout because the Rams are out of it and we kind of got up early, even though yet again we didn't score on our first drive. And then when the Rams came out in the second half and made a game of it and got close, there was a moment there where I sensed the Seahawks team was going to let up a little bit because there was nothing to play for.
Yeah.
So I thought you got to give them credit. I thought the fact that they bowed their backs in the fourth quarter like they did, and the defense came up with a stop when they had to, and Geno made plays when he had to, and I thought they ran the ball more consistently today. I don't dismiss everything that happened today simply because of the game script.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, the last game of the year, it's tough to. Both teams don't have anything to play for. It's like we talked on our last pod, like, well, for Geno Smith, yeah, that's another thing that we can talk about. But you just want to see how this team came out, right? You want to see the fight, and like you said, they finished strong. Because you look around the league, I mean, with the Broncos beat the Chiefs 38-zip. I think the Packers lost with the Bears today. So
yeah,
it's just it's one of those days. You can't put too much stock in it. But like you said, I'm not judging Mike and that defense on today. And like you said, part of it's you don't have much tape on this guy calling plays, and also you're judging him more as a whole, right? And what we saw after the bye week, that switch that's been flipped, you're confident going into next season that this defense can be a foundation that can just keep getting better and better over the next couple of seasons. But yeah, and even the offense, it's one of those things where you mentioned Geno threw 4 TDs, but it's again, you look at the overall offense as a whole, and you don't have to go far back to even just last week and Grubb's performance of 6 points and not running the football and all that kind of stuff. And that's the thing. That's the biggest thing that's going to be interesting if they keep Grubb around. It's just the overall philosophy with both offense, defense, and it just doesn't feel like a match. But if he's here and if there's some change in his philosophy where we see him run the football more. I just want to get your take real quick, because it's been a conversation now, because we've seen Sharps running the ball last few weeks as a starter, and Kenny Mack coming in doing his thing, which Bryce and I are really high on him. Like we want to see Kenny Mack the first day he was drafted, right? Just his versatility, obviously some injuries, and just couldn't get on the field because of Ken and Sharps. But Ken Walker's going to be a conversation as far as, do you extend this guy? Does he have some trade value? Where do you see that situation, Dan? You see them just maybe bringing him back if the trade value is not really there, and maybe just playing out that final year if he wants to do that, or do you say, hey, look, we're going to move forward with Sharps and Kenny Mack? It's cheaper. Ken Walker's got injury history now, and does he fit the running style, right? Kind of a few questions you got to look at. What's your thoughts on that with that running back spot, focusing there with the offense right now?
Yeah, I think you talk about fit, and I think Charbonnet and McIntosh just fit this offense better right now for their style and what they want to be and what they're capable of being. I think, it's so easy to be tantalized by Walker's skill, right? Yeah. Just his physical skill and the quickness, the explosion, the burst. But it's the way that he executes that, and he puts that into practice. It's his tendency to want to bounce everything outside if he doesn't see it right away and try to make a big play out of it. And when he does, man, it looks great and it makes for great highlights and it sells a lot of jerseys, but it's just not the right tone to send. It's not the right style to play based on what Mike McDonald wants to do. And I think the kind of running game you need to have to sort of dictate terms and run offense the way that you want to run offense off of it. You're not going to be able to trade him. There's just no market for a guy who, is in the last year of his deal. It's a second round deal, so it's going to be the biggest cap hit of that deal. When you can go out, this is considered a good running back season, another good running back draft class. You can go out and get a guy on a full rookie deal. You can find veterans on the street now. Look at all the veteran, really good running backs in their prime that changed zip codes last year and are thriving and doing well. And so I don't think there's any value from that standpoint. I just hope that when they go into next off season, the OTAs, the mini camps, everything else, that they open it up for full competition, that he's just not the anointed starter no matter what. Because I think Charbonnet and McIntosh, thankfully, finally got an opportunity the second half of the season, the last few weeks anyway. And those guys can be really productive runners. I really like what they offer. And so I think you have to open it up. I don't think you can just hand him the starting job next year. I don't think he deserves it.
Well, looking just at the box score for today, for example, for the Seahawks. So for Charbonnet, he was 14 carries, 59 yards, average 4.2 yards a carry. Kenny McIntosh was 7 carries for 50 yards and 7 yards a carry.
That's kind of what he's been doing. Huh.
He has been.
The thing I like about McIntosh and what I liked about his film when we got him out of Georgia was he reminds me very much of the Denver Broncos running backs from back when Mike Shanahan was there. Is like they see it, they put their foot in the ground, and they explode north-south. Once they get through the linebackers, then they start looking for their moves. So you're guaranteed about 4 yards a hit out of them, usually. And with McIntosh, like, he's just so explosive, which is surprising. Like, he's not going to run away from somebody, which is fine.
Right.
But he blows through there, and sometimes it's like a 25-yard run, and then he punishes the safety when he comes up to tackle him. And, Charbonnet also ran well, and I like Charbonnet's physicality, and they both seem to catch the ball well out of the backfield, which is nice. The thing for me that, I found interesting today, though, just looking at the receiving stats for Seattle, Noah Fant led the team in catches and yards.
Yeah, he was good today.
He got a touchdown again in LA for the first time since 2022 when his last touchdown occurred against the Rams. AJ Barner, I thought, had another really good game and has really been a very big, pleasant surprise this year. DK, 3 catches, 53 yards, a touchdown. Tyler Lockett, though, again, 2 catches, 28 yards. I thought they might feature Tyler a little bit more, considering, his cleats and some of the stuff that's been going on. I know he said he wants to come back and play.
They took a shot. They took a shot there with him.
They did.
We almost connected with that.
This was JSN's probably lowest game for yardage. He had 4 catches for 9 yards, averaged 2 yards a catch.
Yeah. Got to 100, but
got to 100, and that was basically about it. So it'll be an interesting. I don't know if Noah Fant's back next year, even though he's got a deal. I think it's kind of like one of those void year deals. I believe it is of some sort, because I think he's on his second. Next year will be the last year of his deal, because then they signed him for a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
I don't know if you bring him back. Maybe you do and have him and AJ Barner, unless you can draft somebody like a Tyler Warren. Just saying, if he's there at 16 or 17.
Not on that deal, you're not bringing him back. I think his cap hit next year is like $13.5 million. But I do think that I saw glimpses this second half of the season that he can be a real weapon, kind of what we thought he would be when he came over, and that Grubb was comfortable using him, and that Gino was starting to develop some rapport with him, that I could easily see them extending him really, really, adding another couple of years to that deal. He's young enough. I think he's 26, 27 years old, and lowering that cap hit. I don't think it's a case with him. And with a lot of these contracts we're going to talk about actually in 2025, are structured in such a way. It's not, some of these guys that we think we need to pull levers on to create cap space. It's not cut and dried of whether or not we have to just cut these guys or not. It's many of them make a lot of sense to easily just do restructures or extensions with. And I think Noah would make sense. I do think still there's some upside there that hasn't been tapped into, and that maybe we started to scratch the surface of these last few weeks.
So let's actually talk about the offseason. So, the tabs there, offseason predictions. So, Dan, let's go with you first. I'll throw one at you. What do you think, if any, are there any coaching changes? I know you mentioned you think Grubb might be back. Do you think maybe Jay Harbaugh? Do you think Dirty potentially gets an opportunity? Do you think anyone from this coaching staff is leaving if you were to, be asked right now?
I think only if they're offered better jobs elsewhere. I think we're going to see a lot of status quo this offseason. I really do. I think that it's kind of the organization's MO. I think they all recognize that last year the offseason was truncated because it got off to the late start. It took them a while to decide on a coach and all that stuff that we've talked about to death. I don't think they're going to make any drastic changes this offseason. I don't. I think they believe that another year of continuity, another year of familiarity with the roster, of trying to go out this offseason in free agency and the draft and find scheme fits, guys that fit exactly what Mike Macdonald wants on his team on both offense and defense. I think they're going to run it back with this staff, knowing that the heat gets turned up next year, I think, and with what this ownership has handed down from above that they see as the goal and the intention, which is to compete, win championships, and they weren't interested in taking a step back when they moved on from Pete Carroll. I think they just believe that they're a good, solid offseason and some more structure spent together away from taking the next step. So I know fans don't want to hear that. They want sexy moves, splashy moves. If that's what you're expecting, I think you might be disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's the only thing I'm worried about, really. I think because John Schneider's running it, that I expect a lot of status quo, but I do think Grubb is gone. It wouldn't surprise me if he's not. Like, let's just say that, because of what.
Let me ask you guys this: do you think whose call do you think that is?
Well,
Mike Macdonald or John Schneider?
I think Mike's going to have a big influence on that. Really, I think he will have a lot of influence on that. Just based on what you've seen even during the season, right? Just, I don't think that linebacker moves, those two moves, would have been made like that if Mike wasn't here. If it was Pete and John, I think you play it out. They possibly be back again next season. But I think when you saw that right there, kind of giving an indication that he's got a lot of influence. He's going to be working side by side with John, especially coming into this draft. But again, like you said, if Mike is saying, hey, I can work with them, but who knows what the inner workings has been, week to week meetings and is he, Mike says, I want to run the football, and then we just don't run the football. So that is just a kind of something I'm really hanging on to, where it's just been so predictable, but just not running the football for me is just a huge thing that especially coming from the Harbaugh tree and that mentality of what your offense wants to be like. I can't get excited if we run it back. If we run it back status quo. The defense, yes, I believe in this defense. I think I got no problem. I believe in Mike Macdonald as a head coach for the next 5, 6, 7 seasons. If we even keep him longer, I think he's the guy for the job, and I think he's going to build this defense up. I think there's going to be some changes there, personnel-wise, players on the field for sure. But Dan, I agree with you. Like, I don't expect big splashes. I don't expect like this offensive line getting blown up. I think we're going to extend DK. I think Gino will be back, maybe a year-to-year thing or a 2-year rework. But I think if I could predict, I just want to see a different play caller in here. I just don't believe that running it back like this. I think the offense will really hold us back if that happens. Really, I do. But I just want to see some changes here with this offense. I just think it was so anemic, and so we didn't have an identity, and I just don't know if bringing him back is going to change anything coming in the next season. So it's more of half and half. It's more of a prediction and kind of what I want to see. But again, just knowing how John Schneider operates, I think it's going to come down to a lot, like you said, the conversations if Mike Macdonald and John Schneider are sitting together, and how much influence Mike has.
Okay, so I've taken both of what you guys have both said into consideration. I'll tell you what I think could occur and what I got a feeling will occur. So there's a couple things. I've been kind of trying to monitor the whole offensive coordinator and just certain things. We used to always talk about Pete talk and stuff like that. So one thing, Jake Pete's name has come up a lot, I'd say, in the last month. More than any generic passing game coordinator's name usually comes up per a head coach in interviews or by the media or a lot of people, which is not usually a common thing, especially, you know, with an NFL team, but it's coming up when the offense is struggling greatly. All of a sudden, you know, Jake Peetz is really great at, you know, setting the edge or chasing edges, as Mike McDonald likes to say. You know, brought him up specifically, you know, in regards to the Thursday night game, getting the team prepared. And I think him and Jake Peetz have really hit it off. Two, I look at, you know, the correlation between when Ryan Grubb gets asked similar questions that Mike McDonald has answered previously in a press conference during the week or something like that, and their answers are vastly different in how they kind of want to see things done or how they want to attack that certain thing. It just bodes to being a weird situation. I've been in my fair situations with coaches where I haven't jived with them as a head coach and walked away from the situation or been told, hey, you're not coming back as our offensive coordinator. It's just not a fit. What I want to do versus what you want to do are two different things. And that happens. And I think that could kind of be the thing. Not a straight out, you're fired, like you did a horrible job, Ryan Grubb, you're gone kind of a thing. I think it could be like, hey, look, like my philosophy is A, you don't have that same philosophy. And you can see it. Like Ryan Grubb wants to throw the ball and he wants to throw the ball deep. He struggles with designing plays off of play action. He just struggles with running the ball. And you look at the two main guys that have been Mike McDonald's biggest influences when he's been coaching college or the NFL are the Harbaugh brothers. Jim Harbaugh lives off of play action, running the ball. Look at what he's done with Justin Herbert and that offense. They traded away Keenan Allen and got rid of pieces and turned into a running game. They're fine. They're a good football team. They're playing complementary football to what their defense does well. John's done the same thing in Baltimore. Yes, their defense has taken a massive step back without Mac McDonald being there. But when they were there, that was their thing. Run the ball, play action. So now you go to a pass-happy system, and you can see at points Mike McDonald, just even when they pan to him on the sidelines in different games, kind of being like, he has this look of like, why did we do that there? Why didn't we do this? You know? And so I think if they're going to move on, I don't expect it to be I don't expect it to be Mike Kafka. I don't expect it to be an outside hire. I think they will just promote Jake Peetz, make it a quick transition. And I think it'll be something as simple as, hey, Ryan Grubb, and, you know, it was a philosophical change. And then you'll find Ryan Grubb is hired back at Alabama with the Boar. That's where he goes. The question all this is what happens to Scott Huff. Does he leave as well? Because they were kind of a tandem deal. And are you looking for two guys? Now I'll throw this out there. If Jake Peetz becomes the OC, which is what I think is going to happen, and I've just got a weird gut feeling about it, does Andy Dickerson come back? Because he just got fired by the Browns, and he didn't do a horrible job in Seattle with that O-line and with that running game. Does he come back and become your O-line running game coordinator with Jake Peetz?
Interesting.
And go that way. I just think it's an interesting thing that now he's been let go by the Browns. The Browns, you know, given their situation, they weren't terrible, but he was okay in Seattle with what he did. Does he work better with Jake Peetz and having that kind of correlation come back? You get an O-line coach and a run game coordinator, and you're not doing a whole bunch of, you know, rerouting of the offense. That's my kind of prediction. Yeah.
I don't think their paths crossed in LA, but they certainly, you know, both worked under
know the system and so on.
Came from that tree, yeah, and the terminology and everything else. That's interesting. I saw that John Dorsey had fired in Cleveland. I didn't know they let their whole offensive staff go, so I didn't know Dickerson was one of them. And he was a guy that was getting interviews 2 years ago for offensive coordinator jobs too.
Yes.
And still a young guy kind of on the way up. That's an interesting take.
You know, it's going to be interesting too to see, you know, the Grubb situation, if Grubb wants to just part ways as well and go back to the college game. There could be talks like that. It might not just be hard set, like, you know, you're fired. It could be a conversation.
Great point. Nobody talks about it from his standpoint, right? Like,
maybe this is going to be a grind next year for me, and I'm just going to end it. Like,
he might not have enjoyed calling plays in the NFL as much as he thought he was going to, and may prefer to go back to college.
Yeah, and he goes down to Alabama. I mean, that's something that could happen, and maybe just kind of one of those conversations in office and say, look, what do you think? And maybe he's already talking to guys right now, right? So that's also something to consider. So we'll see. But yeah, the John Schneider, my expectations are just a wait and see approach, because we've mapped out a lot of things over the last couple of weeks to kind of talk and getting into off-season talk. And you know, especially after we got eliminated last week was, you know, a lot of off-season talk, but you map it all out and you kind of have all the like a wish list. But then you have to say, look, let's be realistic of who has been running this football team. So, and I agree. I wouldn't want him to blow up the offensive line because that doesn't make any sense. But I think like for my wish list would be signing that just below level Pro Bowl type of guard. You know, if you can get somebody in here, as well as finding a guy in the draft. But because we're such a young line, you know, get somebody even beside Charles Cross, who's been in the league, who's a good vet, you know, even help him along, right? Just beside him. And just like you said, it's a unit. And they have played better, right? I think people still, it's low hanging fruit where everything is like, well, our O line's trash, so this is the reason this is happening. This is happening. They've been playing decent ball. So I obviously you got to improve it, but I'd like, that's kind of the thing. Even if we get one guy in here that, you know, is that vet who's a good player, you know, not a Lake and Tomlinson guy. I just don't want to see one of those moves again where, you know, free agency, the big splashes are done, and we're sort of picking up some of the pieces that, you know, are still out there, right? And even the Connor Williams, right? Kind of got excited about that, you know, but there was a lot of what ifs, right? Well, he's got the ACL, ends up retiring and not even playing that well even early on. So you kind of hope he doesn't take that same approach. But I do believe he thinks we might be closer. And that's the thing I'm just afraid of. Like, we've been middling. And when you are middling, you can kind of look at it both ways, right? You can kind of say, well, we're a few pieces, and then all of a sudden we might not be middling, like we can get to 12 or 13. But are you that close? And to me, I think the defense is getting better. But if you look at the season overall, I mean, we really didn't beat anybody with a winning record. You could say Denver, but Bo Nix's first game in our house, you know, that was fortunate for us. So, you know, and like I said, a lot of positives with the defense I really like, but I think we're further away. I don't think you blow it up because we got a lot of good young pieces, but you're a good team. You're not a great team. You're not a bad team. It's I mean, Dan, how do we get out of this spot? Is it, I mean, do you believe we're just a few pieces away? Do we have to be that top 5 defense to really take that next step, or do you think it's a few pieces, or do you think it's more than that? Like it's the OC, it's a few higher ups that gotta, you know, because we're kind of stuck in this middle ground for a bit, and it's tough. You talk about the 6 quarterbacks that went ahead in the draft last year, and because we're not that bad team, we didn't even have an opportunity to, you know, maybe take a stab. You look at guys like Jane Daniels going to the playoff, Bo Nix going to the playoffs, and yeah, you're gonna miss on guys, but at least you kind of have, you know, there's that opportunity to take a stab. That's stuff we can talk about too, as far as, you know, who's the next guy in that position, right? Because Gino's getting up in age and he's not the long-term future, but it's tough when you're now 10-7 and where you're picking, and we know it's not a great year, and maybe what do you do? Are you looking to the next year? Because apparently there'll be some better QBs, but what do you do to, because I lean towards that, where John is looking at this and saying, you know what, it's the first year for Mike. We're a few pieces. I really feel like that's his mindset.
But impact pieces, I think that's the biggest thing going into this offseason is you just keep adding good players. And I know that sounds simplistic, but it really is. You know, John Clayton, the late, great John Clayton, used to always say that the NFL is a talent acquisition league. Like, you just keep adding good players. And if you do that, it makes up for, you know, injuries. It makes up for lack of coaching in some cases. As I was watching that game today, even watching that defense, it has played so well over, you know, the last 2/3 of the season. It's definitely an offense or a defense that I think you can build around. I mean, look, in the first year of a new coaching staff, you're looking to establish a couple things. One is culture, and the other one is scheme. I think those things are in place now, right? You know, going into this offseason, you don't have to establish those now. You just have to continue to act on those things, right? You just have to add some difference makers, even on that defense. As much as we like that defense, here's the best example. The edge group. We all really like Boye Mafe. We all really like Derek Hall and Uchenna Nwosu. Are any of those guys players that you have to game plan for? right? Like sometimes I forget Boye Mafe's on the team, and then he'll get a couple of sacks, and you know, people will talk about how he's an ascending player and he's putting it all together. It's year 3. Like isn't he just kind of who he is at this point? I think Derek Hall's the same type of player. Like none of those guys are going to turn into Micah Parsons. And so you still have to try to find those types of impact players. And I think people will call me crazy when I say this on the offensive side of the football. I really only think you need to add one guy to that offensive line. I really do. Whether that comes in free agency, and he doesn't have to be Trey Smith, right? You don't have to spend $25 million AAV to do it. You just have to get the right guy in there, because you've spent so many draft picks in the last few years on offensive linemen. Do you think they're willing to just move off of all that depth and bring in like 4 new guys? No, they believe in Mike Gerald. They believe in Tao Lamea. They believe in Oluwatimi and even Jalen Sundell behind him. They believe in Christian Haynes still. That we've heard the reports that he was working at center the last couple of weeks. Maybe that's his future. We know he did that at the Senior Bowl last year. I think you just add one really good player to that group and continue with the continuity, and it can get to where you want it to get to. Right? You know, don't stop adding good players at any position just because you think we're okay there. We're not. We still need another game wrecker on defense up front. We need another corner. For sure, we need another corner. We saw that today. And so, you know, I say that because we're heading into, you know, our favorite time of the year, which is mock draft season and the what if season, right? And everybody just wants to take an offensive lineman in the first round, but that might not be how the board falls, or they might solve that problem before the draft even gets here.
Yeah.
So, you know, just have an open mind. I think they believe they're just a few players away and another season of this staff coaching this group from taking that next step. And I think they think they'll be better than the Rams when they come back next year if they keep it mostly intact. That's where I'm operating from.
So one little piece of news before we move on to a little bit of a topic. Ernest Jones was asked in the locker room. I don't know if you've seen this, Dan, but he was basically asked, you know, do you think you're going to be a Seahawk? What do you think? And he goes, we're going to get it done. I'm going to be a Seahawk. I firmly believe that. He then later on said he definitely thinks a deal gets done before free agency. So for everyone,
good. I'm glad you brought that up because
freaked out.
The overreaction this morning.
Oh my gosh, it drove me nuts. Everyone freaking out about that. Like if
get rid of John Schneider. Yeah.
If it had gotten to March and free agency and no talks had happened and we hadn't really heard anything, then you have some, okay, what's the issue? What's going on? But when that's Rappaport trying to make relevant news occur for a team that doesn't have anything really going on, you know, that's what they do. They stir the pot a little bit. You know, someone says something, but to hear the player directly say that in the locker room following the game, things are going in the right direction. Ernest Jones will be a Seahawk in 2025 and moving forward.
And Greg Bell talked a lot about this. Well, he talks about it every year, and Corbin brought it up too. So much work is done at the combine because it's really the best opportunity for agents to rub elbows with and interact with front office personnel. And that's where guys like John Schneider get a feel for what the market is. There's enough time then. Teams are putting their boards together. Free agency's usually only, 2 weeks after the combine?
Yeah.
Ish. And
it's
so
like the legal tampering period.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Those conversations are being had. And where agents find out what the market's going to be like is because they can have those conversations with the team that their player last played for, right? So like Ernest Jones' agent can get a feel for, he'll know what the Seahawks are willing to pay by the combine, and then he'll go have dinner with some people that week, and he'll kind of get a feel, even though you're not really supposed to talk about terms with teams who are not on your roster, right? But no, that's really, really good news because he's key. He's a huge key. I do think we're going to find out the major questions about the offseason early in the offseason. Again, some fans aren't going to like this. I think they're going to come out in the next couple of weeks in some way, at least by the combine at the latest. And I think as opposed to 2 years ago with the Geno Smith thing where Schneider was like, he's our quarterback until he's not. Remember that whole thing, about whether he gets signed. That was really ambivalent. There was some talk maybe they were shopping him around at the combine that year, trying to get a feel for his trade value. I think they're going to make a pretty definitive decision on that front early in the offseason so it doesn't drag on and we're not all wondering whether he's going to be on the roster or not, even though they have until March to
19th, I think,
pay that first bonus. Yeah.
So actually segued right into this last point before we go to comments and get into that for a bit.
Because you know
QB situation going forward and what's the plan. So Dan, I know you talked about it on your show the other day. Me and Ryan have obviously talked about it to death, so we're not going to go into it too long.
Yeah.
But if you are setting the Seahawks up for the next 5 years, not the next 2 or 3, the next 5 years, what is your plan for the quarterback situation? Do you reset the room completely this offseason? Do you sign Geno to an extension and roll back Sam Howell and him as a group? Or do you go out and potentially extend Geno with the thought process as a kind of a year-to-year situation, but you start taking, bites at that apple to find the bridge? Because like I've said on our show, currently you are on the Geno bridge, but you're staring at halfway point and staring into abyss because John Schneider has never really presented the other side of that bridge and what Geno's supposed to be. He was supposed to be a bridge.
Yeah.
We've just never seen what he's bridging to. For me, I want to see what we're bridging to. I want the draft a quarterback this year, and everyone says this is a bad class. Yeah, sure. It's a bad for a plug-and-play starter day one. Absolutely.
Right.
But I think there is value in this draft class for picking a guy that could be a starter in 2 to 3 years when you can develop him behind an established guy and not pressure him into play anywhere like right away. And, Dan, I know on our other show, which we'll talk about later on this, we'll talk about those a little bit more.
Yeah. I think my plan would be you absolutely keep Geno Smith. And I think that probably is going to require a short creative extension, maybe with some void years involved, similar to the deal he signed last time. It gives him some money and some security up front, makes him feel good, lets him know that, they're committing to him beyond the next year, but also lowers his cap hit for 2025, which right now with the incentives he hit today is, I think, $43.5 million now. And you keep Sam Howell because he's cheap and on the last year of his deal, and you draft a guy probably on day 2, but maybe on day 1, because we see this all the time. Even though the 2 guys that are talked about at the top of this draft are unattainable, some of the other guys that are talked about as day 2 picks, just because of the need of the position and because a couple of them will most likely just really nail the draft process, will rise up boards, and some teams at the back of the first round or teams that want to move up into the back of the first round might start considering those guys. And so that's my plan, is you finally devote 3 roster spots to quarterbacks, which they've rarely done, although at the end of this year they did when they elevated Jaron Hall. But that's what I do. You run it back with Geno, you come to a contract solution, hopefully, as I said earlier, as early in the offseason as you can, to just set that tone, right? Clear the cap space. You continue to improve the offensive line, because I think that offense is close to being good and can be good with him operating it. And then keep Sam Howell because it's a no-brainer. He's 25 years old. His cap hits $1 million. He started 17 games in the league, and he's familiar with your scheme. And then you start drafting a guy every single year if you have to, until you find one that you believe can be the next guy. That's what I would do.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised that just the process hasn't started earlier. That's the thing. Like, Geno's now 3 years in, and I really thought that was going to be sort of the limit, right? And now you look at it and like, man, John's looking around, and that's the thing. That's why it's, what do? You get rid of him, and you're just going to grab some free agent where the free agent class isn't even that good. I mean, I think though you could bring in another guy. Like you could maybe bring in like a Zach Wilson, or I don't know. There's a few guys that bring him in camp at least. I could go either way if they brought Sam back. And yes, I agree absolutely. You got to draft a guy. I know, Bryce, you like that Jackson Dart kid. Like there's some dudes. I watched a lot of highlights of him, and he'd be fun to just pick up that guy. Like you said, you don't have to start him right away. If he isn't the guy, great. But you took a shot. Like we were talking about, grab a guy last year in day 2, whatever. But that's the thing. Like, is John gonna do it? If he just runs it back again, and then we go through a whole draft anticipating a QB, and they don't even call a name, that'll be very disappointing because
Yeah.
if just on a personal level, just being honest, it's like I'm not excited to run it back with Geno. I see why we would, but I don't get excited, and I just think it goes hand in hand with who's going to be calling the plays. If we have Ryan Grubb back calling plays with Geno Smith in his offense, I just can't get excited about that. I think I could get more, excited because you're establishing this defense with maybe a more of a veteran play caller in the league, or at least like a guy in the league, in Pete's, for example, that's been in the NFL. Then I could say, okay, a new philosophy, a little better offensive line. Okay, maybe he's at least a bit of a stepping stone till we get this young kid on board. But again, if we don't draft a guy, I'm that could just be it for me with Schneider. Like I just man, like you got, because then what's the plan? If you just say, well, I'm going to wait till the 26th draft because it's better, it's just you just keep kicking the can, and it's like, dude, there are guys. Like guys have drafted guys last year. Someone took Spencer Rattler. It's like there's guys that you can get later. Like Bryce says, maybe not a plug and play guy. But again, even plug and play guys don't pan out half the time. So
no, look at the 6 that were drafted this year, right?
Yeah, and
2 of them are in the playoffs.
We know what happens, but at least you're grabbing those guys. Like Michael Penix looks like he could be the guy for Atlanta moving forward, and that you want to get excited is for us. And that's the thing when you look at us and we're sort of just hovering, we're middling. And like you said, you look at those teams that do have these rookies going to the playoffs, like they leapfrogged us. You look at a team like Washington, you're like, and even when you look at Denver, right? And I'm not saying Bo Nix is this amazing guy, but he's Sean Payton, again, a good play caller. And then this team, you talk about it and how quickly things can change. The Russell Wilson situation in Denver was a complete mess. The first season was under Hackett was a disaster. The reason we got the 5th overall pick. And then here comes Sean Payton from day one, hating his guts. And we saw how that went down. The next season, they're in the playoffs, right? So things can change quick in the NFL. You get your guy you want. Sean Payton was like, I'm not going to do it with Russ. I want my own guy. So I just want to see that next step. John's got to just call a quarterback's name. A guy has to be called this year. That's what I want
agree.
To see more than anything.
And I think that when they traded Russ, they 100% believed that within the next 2 drafts they'd get a shot at a guy at the top of the draft.
You thought that's what was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like if we sat back 3 years
their way.
Yeah.
It didn't fall their way. Even when they had the 5th pick, that was their best chance. But the guy that they reportedly were the most in love with was Richardson. He went 1 spot before them.
Right.
And, they didn't like any of the other guys that were still on the board. And actually now maybe we're glad that they dodged that bullet, because Richardson certainly hasn't done anything to look like, to me, that he's going to improve upon, the passer that he was in college and become that guy that you can count on. So, but I do think you make a really great point. I think this fan base is restless right now. And there's, I think it's like a lot of environments whenever there's decisions to be made about personnel. It's probably a bell curve. I sense that, most Seahawk fans believe, like we do, like we're talking about here, that Geno's a good, solid quarterback for now, but what's next? I want to know what's next. Right. And then at the bottom of the bell curve, there's the people that just think he stinks and doesn't belong in the league. And then at the top of the bell curve are the people that just think he's everything you want in a quarterback, and they don't even want to consider, any plans that even suggest replacing him, right? So that's kind of where everyone falls in the middle. But I think, man, you'd appease a lot of those people that are concerned about the future if you just started taking guys. Not Alex Magoo in the 7th round, right? Not Holton Ahlers as an undrafted free agent, not Jaron Hall picked off someone's practice squad. Draft a guy, God damn it. We've heard Schneider tell us for 15 years that that's what he learned to do, and he grew up learning in the Packers organization. He watched him do it, and it just has never fallen their way. Well, this is that draft. We're going to get into it a lot over the next couple of months, but Bryce touched on it. While there's only a couple guys considered to be worthy of going at the top of the draft, there are more guys in this draft who have played a ton of football, have a bunch of starts, and have some traits and some upside and some ceiling you can squint your eyes and believe in, and that are going to be there on day 2, maybe even day 3. And you have to take one this year. There's no excuse not to. You got to start taking it.
The biggest thing for me I don't want to hear is I don't want to hear the bullshit from John Schneider on, oh, well, I always want to take a quarterback, this, that, and the other. You're not going to find Russell Wilson 2.0 again in the third round. You're not going to find the guys you fell in love with where you're picking constantly in the lower half of the first round in the Josh Allens. Because the last QB you could have taken in the lower half that's turned into be a superstar in the lower half of the first round is Lamar Jackson. And you didn't take it. You let it go. And that was, now you see what he's doing. He's almost potentially going to be a third-time MVP. John Schneider, if he doesn't take a quarterback this year, needs to be under, not, offensive line aside and all those issues. If he does not finally take a swing on drafting someone, John Schneider needs to be seriously under fire for whether or not he comes back in 2026, because he is not then doing his job as setting up your franchise for long-term success when you have a 35-year-old quarterback going forward. And everyone wants to talk about, quarterbacks can play longer. We've seen 3 guys really be successful into their late 30s and early 40s, which is Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and Peyton Manning. And even Peyton Manning, to the end of his, really started to taper off. You look at what Aaron Rodgers has become and how bad he's gotten in the last, torn Achilles, really bad year with the Jets.
Yeah.
You need to take a freaking swing and stop saying, didn't see the right up. Just take a damn swing, man. No one's going to chew you out for taking a swing on Jackson Dart in the third round. No, and if he ends up, guess what? He could be an improvement over Sam Howell as your backup.
And in fact, I'll even take that one step further. I think it'd be smart for Schneider to start doing that for his own job security.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because I think he's going to go into this next offseason on the hot seat, right?
Yep.
They've set the standard. When they fired Pete, they fired a legend. Pete sat out there and said, it was handed down to me from ownership. No interest in a rebuild. They want to win. We don't plan on taking a step back. Here we go. Well, it didn't get us back to the playoffs this year.
Did not.
Right. And despite how optimistic, we are about where they could go, he's on the hot seat. And if they have another season similar to this one, where they're right there at 9-10 wins, they even if they make the playoffs, but it's barely, and the offense still has no identity, and they're not physical, and they're not running the football, and the offensive line's a wreck, and it's holding us back from being what we can be, I think he's gone. But what you can do as a general manager to bolster your job security is give your bosses hope for the future. And so what I'm trying to say is it would behoove him to start drafting these guys anyway, so he could also say, hey, but we think Will Howard's the shit, and just in a year or two, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah,
it just makes sense. Yeah, if he goes through this entire offseason and doesn't acquire another quarterback, draft a guy, then I'm going to be very surprised. I'm going to start criticizing him personally on a level that I never have.
I mean, I just threw this out. Let's get some Q&As, but JS probably doesn't see himself being on a hot seat, man. I kind of agree with that. Like, unless there's a serious sit down with ownership, which I think there will be, then I just, like we just talked about how the mentality of, we're maybe in a better spot, 10-7, we're just a little ways away. I think that's kind of always been his mentality. So he might look at it like, hey, I have double-digit wins this year. I'm not on the hot seat. I mean, unless there's that serious conversation from ownership. That's if I'm John Schneider, that's where I'm. If I was John, I would, just being him, I would probably think that. Like I said, unless Jody said, hey, you got to come in here, and
that's the thing. There's conversations we're not privy to, but there were those reports last year, and I talked to somebody who's pretty well connected that shared with me, off the air also, that this is how it went down. That when the reason it took 4 days to fire Pete Carroll last year, as opposed to, you see what some teams do. Jesus, the Patriots could barely.
Yeah, they couldn't hold their water on that one. They
could barely wait until the clock went to 0.
Yeah,
fire like a legend. Don't get me started on that. But the reason it took so long, they had a bunch of meetings, and one of the meetings, ownership said to Pete, we're willing to bring you back for the last year of your deal and run this back one more time, because Pete went in there and made a lot of promises. Here's how I'm going to fix this thing. I know how we're going to fix this. We're going to get it done. And they said, okay, we're willing to take you at your word and let you come back. But if it doesn't work in 2024, then we're cleaning house and you and John are both gone. To which Pete's response was, I don't want that to happen. Like, basically, he didn't want to fall on the sword if it meant, saving himself if it was putting John at risk. And so that tells me, if ownership say, if there's some truth to those reports, I have no reason to believe that there aren't, because I trust the source. Then, and there were multiple sources on this story as well. I think you guys have heard it too. That they were willing to move off John Schneider, that as much as they love him as a person and his wife and his family and everything else. And I know that they're in touch with how the public feels and what they're doing. They have a lot of people in that organization that keep their finger on the pulse of social media. His son, Jack, at Boise State, is like the social media dude. And he's the guy that's always telling them, like, Dad, they're saying this, they're saying that. Like, he knows. And he also knows he has no safety net now, because he can't blame anything on Pete.
Exactly.
Right? You get a pass the first year because you have to put it all together. But I think ownership's looking for serious improvement over the next year or two. And I don't think John Schneider is immune from losing his job just because they like him as a person. And he's done a bunch of good stuff in the community and helped bring a Super Bowl.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, guys. So I'm just going to say one thing.
2 favorite shows of this year. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
So one thing, everyone get active in the chat. There's a giveaway coming. You need to be active in the chat to have an entry in it. We'll do that just before the show ends tonight, so make sure you're active in the comments. But here, let's go through some of the ones that we've kind of pegged out throughout.
Let's fire through these here.
Amy's come out with
names out. People just throwing out names.
Wish Grubb could have schemed up a Lockett TD today. Yeah, it would have been nice. And Burt Cole
tried to.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it was, honestly, tad underthrown. Lockett had a little bit of a step on him.
Close, yeah.
It was a tad.
So that was an interesting one. Yeah. Robert Hale from Hal from Dan's show over there at Seahawks Forever. He says, keep Geno, draft a QB, fix the O-line, need better play calling on offense. We all basically said the same thing, and it's kind of, I'd flip the reverse role of that. Play calling, I think you need a better OC. You need to fix the O-line. Then you need to draft a quarterback and keep Geno.
Sure.
That's how it should, in my opinion, that should be the order of that. Keep Geno, because he's already on a deal. You can keep him on that deal if you really wanted to. Hawks fan Matt Man, who's always in our chat, and everyone else's comes in. John Schneider apparently already stuck his foot in his mouth again. This is the comment I was alluding to on 710 that we already talked about with the, hey, we're going to draft develop. We're already looking at the prospects. So yeah, here's another one coming in. Fear the Beard, who's new. This is the first time I've seen him in our chat. The score reflects the lack of depth on the Hawks defense. A lot of starters went out and the backups sucked. Lamea and Gerald both sucked.
Ooh, I disagree on Lamea. I think I see a starter there. I do.
I think he had some bad play today at points where you could see like he lost his rep and that caused the issue. I think you do have potentially I think Mike Jarrell will take over that swing tackle role. I think that's what he's being groomed to be. Because Forsythe didn't play much today at all. I don't think George Fant will be back on this roster. I think that's going to be Mike Jarrell's job.
But he's right about the defense. I think.
Gosh, yes. Nehemiah Pritchett, I wanted to see him, and that did not go so well today.
Yeah, that's one. Although you're down to your third corner at that point. I mean, Job was out, and then
Trey Brown struggled a bit.
And Woolen had to leave. But as far as the defensive line goes, I've been saying that for a while. I mean, I think they need, you and I have talked about this a lot, Bryce. They need a younger one technique, a guy that plays 0-1 technique, a true nose tackle to move Byron Murphy. So free him up, right? To unlock him, to do what he does best. There's a lot of talk of he's kind of failed to meet standards or expectations his rookie year. Well, he had to do a bunch of the grunt work. He didn't get to do any of the fun stuff that he's really good at, 2-eye, 3 technique stuff. But also, the failure of some of those guys to step up. Cam Young can't stay healthy. We expected him to maybe be in the mix to be that guy I just mentioned. And Mike Morris failing to become a
Do
part of the
anything.
rotation and contribute in any way, that seems like a miss in his second year, and so you've got to have that rotation. You got to have those guys in, and I think it's a big part of the offseason storyline, because there's this assumption among a lot of the fan base that in order to clear cap space that, well, we're just going to cut Draymond Jones. Hankins isn't going to be back. And we're going to probably cut Roy Robertson Harris too, because his cap hit's too big next year. You do that, you're down to slim pickings.
Yeah.
After that. So you still, man, you got to add on that defensive line too. I consider that including the edge group. When I say defensive line, I mean those front five, really, depending on what scheme you're running. You got to keep adding to that every year, really, because you're going to lose some guys.
This is true. So MWM is always in the chat. Appreciate it. Very tough going into a draft, counting on drafting a day one starter that makes a significant impact. It's kind of true. You look at Byron Murphy, like we all kind of, when we drafted him, pegged him as a potential starter on this D line. He was rotational through a majority of the year, and he had impact, but nothing statistically that blew you off the page. Like there were the comps of people saying, hey, he's going to be like Aaron Donald. Well, I don't think he's there, and I don't think he will ever be that Hall of Fame player, because in my opinion, Aaron Donald and Lawrence Taylor are potentially the two greatest defensive players in NFL history. I don't know if Byron Murphy's ever going to reach that, but I want to see a jump from him next year. And I think a part of it, Dan, is exactly what you said. We need to get another guy in here to give him more ability to move up and down the line, and be in that kind of situation. So we got one here, which
one thing I will say is, the year before there was a little bit of impact. Devin Witherspoon.
I would say yes, and
I would say he came out. No, I'm not talking about he's gonna make rookie mistakes, but yeah. Talk about Pro Bowl. Even JSN came on second half pretty strong. You kind of knew right away that was going to be your. I know that's off on the side of the ball, whatever, but that was kind of like you knew this guy was going to now be the second receiver pretty quickly, and now people thinking maybe the first receiver. But.
Well, and to address that comment too, it's John's going to do what he does in the offseason, and that is that by the time we get to the draft, he'll have used free agency the way he always does every offseason to hedge against a lot of needs. And so we won't go into this draft in April feeling like we have to have this guy because that spot is left, we need a starter there. And I know people will point to, well, yeah, that didn't work very well last year. Yeah, last year's free agent class was pretty much a whiff, but he's done pretty well in the past. And what I like, some of his better moves have been finding those ascending players that haven't quite gotten, they're on expiring contracts, but they haven't quite gotten to a point yet where they demand top of the market money. Uchenna Nwosu is a great example of that, right? He was a guy that was kind of a rotational player with the Chargers, but they saw the upside. He was still young. He hadn't really blossomed yet. They were able to get him on that initial contract for a really reasonable amount, sort of reminiscent of when they signed Bennett and Averill on their first deal, right? Kind of got him in a bargain because they hadn't really made a name for themselves. And, maybe this is the offseason, he kind of gets back to that and hits on a couple of those. Because I felt like last year, again, with everything being behind and they had to play catch up and learning a new coaching staff and not having them involved in the, the assessment process or the draft process, that John was just kind of going out and sort of throwing darts a little bit, just trying to bring in solid players. Well, he didn't get any impact that way, but he has in the past. And so, the pressure is going to be turned up this offseason. He's going to have to hit on some of those moves.
Absolutely.
So this is a super chat that came in from It Tolls for Thee, which is off of Dan's side over there. He goes, Seattle football fans, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Appreciate that.
Parental way to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Hawks fan Matt again. I feel like we have to hope ownership puts pressure on John, especially since they apparently pay attention to the fans and the media takes. But if Jody is going to sell, will she bother firing him?
That's good.
I haven't heard anything on the sales side of things for a bit.
Yeah.
So that'll be.
He's not getting fired this offseason. If that's if that's what you want, it's not happening this offseason.
No. IB English comes in with John will be hard to get rid of after next year because we should improve. It's very true. It could be very much.
We should improve, but you could say that after, the first Geno year, and then really, and then what we came back 9-8, and really the same thing, and that's where the Pete firing happened. And now Mike's first year, but as far as a team's concerned, we are the different issues. The defense fixed, the offense is worse, and we beat a backup team today. We could have, that Rams team played full starters. I mean, we could be back at 9-8. So you're talking, there's no guarantee we're going to be better. Let's just say that John can do what he does. He can go do his thing, but it's going to depend on a lot of things. So that's the thing when you're a middling team right now, you could be stuck there. So
here's why I think the pressure is turned up this offseason, and why I think John's going to be on the hot seat, because there just won't be the excuses that there were this year. You won't be able to say brand new coaching staff, wasn't familiar with them, they weren't involved in the process. That's all going to be taken care of. But also on top of that, I think you look at this division as a whole, and there's opportunity there to take control of this division. There isn't a dominant team. In fact, you can argue that the 49ers are a descending team, that the Rams have to kind of, I wouldn't call them ascending. I think McVay gets the most out of his players, but they have some issues to address, and they need to fix some things. They have some aging players they need to make decisions on there, and they have to have another good offseason themselves. And then the Cardinals, I think, just have a lot of work to do. And so there's an opportunity there, but also we know the schedule next year is going to be a lot more favorable too. Like getting to play the AFC South is a huge advantage over this year. We had to play the NFC North, and, playing a second place schedule in some of our other, we'll know all the opponents for sure here tonight, if we don't already. No, we need to see how this game goes in the NFC North, because I think we play the second team.
We play the loser at home next year of tonight's.
That's right. So go Vikings, right? Because it'd be nice to play the Lions at home for a change.
This is very true. So it'll be interesting. But
hey, real quick, I'll say this.
My point though was that all those things now are going to line up to the fact that watch next August, the Seahawks are going to be a favorite among a lot of preseason prognosticators because of all these reasons. But it's also the reason that the heat's going to be turned up on the GM.
I agree, and I hope you're right. I agree 100%. The heat's turned up, and it's so. What will he do to respond? That's the thing. We got a long off season. It's going to be a super interesting off season, and we're going to have a lot of fun. Like for us, it's almost more fun to see. Like you've said, Dan, it's almost more fun than regular season, because
it is more fun.
You love the games. You're fired up to the lead up of the season. But then, man, there's just so much to talk about. But guys, I'm going to let you guys sort of finish this off. Dan, appreciate you coming on again. Appreciate the support. Always, guys, again, appreciate everybody that's in the chat and supporting the channel. I'm out, but guys, hit the notification button. I know, Bryce, you're going to chat all about that, but we got Brandon Kane on tomorrow too, so we're right back at it. And who knows, within this 24 hours, we could have some changes already. So, okay, guys, good chatting, and we'll talk to you guys soon here.
All right, Ryan.
See you, Ryan.
Later, guys.
All right, guys. So it's me and Dan now for the remainder of this, and we'll kind of punch through a bunch of these. And, me and Dan usually just love sitting here talking anyways, so it'll be good for everybody. But let's get into this. So we've got Fab here with mark my words. Next year, we are winning the division. I could see it. I really could.
Sure.
It could be, the 49ers are kind of in a reeling situation. The Cardinals are kind of up and down. They're kind of who we thought they were in a way. And, the Rams, they are young. The Rams are going to be our challenge, I think. I think this is setting up to be more of a Rams-Seahawk battle over the next few years than a 49er in the situation. Mainly because I don't know if the 49ers pay Brock Purdy what they're thinking of paying him. We all know what it's like when you sometimes do that and your quarterback can't deliver and you are missing pieces. And like Trent Williams is getting older, Fred Warner, this defense, you're going to have to pay some other guys some money. You got to make some decisions. You can't keep everything together. And we kind of saw that with the LOB and what happens. IB English, who's been super into our chat, Dan, who replaces Lockett, draft or free agent? I'll let you take this one.
I mean, it's probably free agency. And I say that just because for a couple of reasons. One is it's so hard. John's a believer, and he was quoted as saying this a couple of years ago that it takes, young wide receivers a couple of years to really learn the pro game. and they haven't gotten a lot of production out of their draft picks at that position in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. Tariq Young was a 7th rounder. I think he's the last guy, and he's been a non-factor this year. Jake Bobo is essentially wide receiver 4. He was an undrafted free agent. But I think that's one of those positions that this year's draft isn't as good as the last 4 or 5 have been, unfortunately, because I do think it's a not very sneaky need on this team, especially with Lockett moving on, we all assume. But it's just this particular draft is full of like slot type guys, smaller guys, which you might think, well, that's ideal, right? To replace Lockett, because that's kind of what he was. But I just think as far as when you're considering as a whole, just that weapon group and who could be a complementary player to JSN and what they have already, you'd prefer to have maybe some of those bigger guys that can stretch the field. And it's just a weak draft for that. They have other needs. I think going out in the free agent market, when you can find you can find bargains every year. Mm-hmm. Guys that are under 30 and they just weren't a fit, or maybe the shine has come off of them a little bit. I think they'll do that in free agency. I think they'll have that kind of tied up so that when we go into the draft, we aren't going to feel like that's a big need.
Right. And we can kind of just play how the board falls at that point.
Yeah.
He comes back with, I like Charbonnet's running style over Walker. I would move him. I know you said, Dan, there isn't a market that drafts really good. I think the one thing you may be able to is if a team misses out on one of the more top-end draft picks of the running back position, I think you could still move Walker. You're never going to get the capital back that you took him at the second round. You're not. But if you could get a 4th or a 5th for Walker, I think there's some merit to it, because I don't know if you sign him to an extension. I just don't think the injury history is there for it. And
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either. And I think, my prediction is him and Woolen both of them may not be on this roster next year when they actually sit down and start breaking it down. I think there's a good chance that corner is a higher need on Seattle's list than most people think, because I don't think they think Woolen could be, the type of guy. My concern with him is when I'm hearing concentration things and Mike McDonald even saying, hey, he needs to be locked in all the time. Like, you shouldn't be saying that to a 3rd-year pro player, that you need to be locked in. We're not talking about a 3rd-year college player. We're talking about a 3rd-year pro player. So that's one. Let's see what else we got here. Jason, leave it to the last few weeks of the season for Grubb to figure out the run game and how to use a good tight end like Fan. Yeah, Fan had a good game today. We talked about it earlier, and, this is my Grubb concern, is he didn't seem to learn or adapt throughout the year very well. And, we've talked about it at, nauseum with him, is you had a bad O-line. You could have figured that out by week 5. You had a bye week, and you still were doing things that weren't helping that young O-line. And we talked about continuity, why we don't think you blow up the entirety of this O-line. But certain things, when you have the number 1 shotgun rate, and you look at the teams in the NFL that are being successful, the Vikings, the Lions, a lot of these teams, they get under center more. They're more varied with their formations and what they do, so teams can't pin their ears back and go at you. This is where I struggle with Ryan Grubb, and I just don't know if he translates philosophically well enough to the NFL game.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but I do feel like there was some progress throughout the year, and maybe that was just tied directly to pass protection, that it got better. I don't know, man. I'm left with this empty feeling right now at the end of the season that this offense could have been so much more.
Yep.
But that they started to maybe touch on some of those aspects the last few weeks. Like, they really did get the running game going a few times. There were games where it was a legitimate factor. I was at the game in Glendale where we pretty much controlled that game because of the running game. And I don't think it's a coincidence that our best games running the football this year, games where Ken Walker wasn't available. Like, I think the guys, I think Charbonnet and McIntosh just have a style that fits more what they're looking for and what they need to make that running game go right now.
All right, so we've got a few winners in our chat here that's populated, if anyone can see these. So we've got, just to go over them right now, and it'll be a good thing. So we've got IB English wins in the giveaway. Smith, for some reason, Mike Old Greasy Smith, you're getting something. Flip Nomad, you're getting something, and Hawks fan Matt and Brandon Myers. You guys are all getting things. So, guys, please, if you guys can send a DM to my Twitter, it's at the bottom here. I'll pull it up here. Just give me a second here. It is Bryce Coots _ at HZR. If you guys can DM that, send me your information on where you like things to be shipped. I'll make sure to ship you guys something from the HawksZone Rundown store page. And if I do forget at a point, please remind me over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be kind of hectic on the show. So, yeah, those will be our winners. But we'll go back to the viewer Q&A. Marcus Jones from Seahawks Forever comes over. Kenny might just have took K9's spot, and it's unfortunate there's no running back market. Yeah, like there's a potential there. So let's see what we got. Brendan Meyer. Tyler Warren and AJ Barner would be a nasty in 12 personnel. Oh, yes, they would. I have dreams about that situation because I think that's something I would like to see more from the Seahawks just because of some of these other teams using it, especially to help with the run game, pass pro. But I can just envision, JSN, DK Metcalf, Tyler Warren, AJ Barner, and Charbonnet or McIntosh in the backfield. You've got a pretty lethal set there. It's going to be very interesting.
Has one of those off seasons where he goes and studies with someone, he goes to a couple camps, hangs out with a couple other NFL coordinators or head coaches, and sort of goes to school. He's like, now he understands, okay, the hash marks are different, right? The personnel is different. And, some of the comments he made this week about understanding defensive schemes and those families and how to attack them. And what am I trying to say? Like you can get better as a play caller, right? Some coaches do. It's not all or nothing. I think we felt like in Shane Waldron's second year that he was a better play caller than he was in his first, right? And then I don't know what happened after that, but I have always felt like he's a really intelligent guy. And I think he's going to do everything he can do this offseason to try and be a better play caller. We'll find out, if he even gets a chance, because I could be wrong. They could make a move, we'll see. I do think it was odd that Burt Cold made the trip again this week.
Do you think that had to do with Tyler, though?
Maybe.
That's what I potentially, I think, it could be something to be talked about because we know it's not Mike McDonald. So that's one thing for sure.
Right.
I like this one from Hawks fan Matt, man, which is something I think is going to happen. He goes, the most important thing the Seahawks can do this offseason is going back to the modernized throwbacks permanently. I think what you're going to see Seattle do, and it was leaked kind of last offseason, but didn't really happen. And I think it may be what they eventually do go to, and maybe why we saw the throwbacks a couple of times this year. I think they're going to go to the throwback jersey, but they're going to modernize it. The colors are going to be throwback, but it's going to have this type of Seahawks logo and the more aggressive logo that we see now on the Seahawks helmet, but with the throwback scheme. It's going to give everyone a little bit of what they want. They're going to have the modernized logo, but they're going to go back to the throwback color scheme with maybe some changes to it. And then what I think you could see is that'll be the end of them. They may still wear the throwback, but I think they may go to the white throwback instead of the blue throwback and go with that one as the change up to have their alternate, and go with like that. I don't remember if you Dan probably remember it as well as I do, but do you remember the forest green alternative for those throwbacks? They wore them, I think, one time with Ricky Waters and that crew.
Yeah.
That could be the potential alternate.
There is a lot of buzz about this, and it's because I saw some stuff just the other day again that there's kind of this assumption out there that there might be a uniform change this offseason because next year is the 50th season of the Seahawks, and it would be time to make a change. And then how long has it been? When did these current uniforms debut?
2012.
2012. So it's been 13 years. Yeah. It's
and you had the other ones from 2002 to 2012, the Hasselback era ones.
Yeah. It wouldn't shock me. It made sense. The timing was right for the other ones. The timing kind of feels right again, head coaching regime, all of that. Those new throwbacks, if that's a term. They just look so sharp, and everyone loves them so much that I think if they went to those full time, that would be awesome. I tweeted this out the other day. I think we've seen the last of the action green.
Yes.
As much as I was an apologist for those and didn't hate them as much as some people seem to, I don't think we're ever going to see those again. There's going to be something this next offseason, either a new primary uniform or making the throwbacks permanent, and then maybe they'll have another alternate mixed in there.
Yeah, I think for them, they're going to want to keep the history of the throwback the way it is, and they're going to go to the throwback scheme, color, silver helmet, all of that, but they're going to go with the modernized Hawk, which I like the more aggressive Hawk. Like, I like the retro Hawk, but I do like the modernized version. And I'll bring the concept up on tomorrow's show, because I do have it saved on my Twitter somewhere, that the one that I think they may go to, that I've heard rumblings about. So if they do go to that, I think it'll be great. It'll be an interesting, sense to kind of go to. Dan, I think you got a new member that came on here. You got the Snail. He became a new member to your YouTube, because we don't have that yet, but we will have that, guys. We are going to be starting a membership program, which will give you special episodes, discounts on the team store that we have, or I shouldn't say team store, but the HawksZone Rundown store, and some other things there. Here's one that always comes up. Fields could be available from the Steelers. He can't really throw, though. That's a very fair point. I like that.
Someone that suggests Justin Fields is also acknowledging.
He's aware of the one glaring issue with Justin Fields.
I get it, but I think the only way that I could talk myself into Justin Fields is if they did completely move off of Geno. Like, if they just decided, we can't afford the money, we love you, but we're going to let you go to the open market. We need a veteran to come in, and we're going to draft a guy and try and go that way. Maybe because he's a guy that makes some things happen with his feet. He's a guy that you have to manage so closely, and you could speak obviously better to this, Bryce, because you coach offense and quarterbacks, but like someone that's that poor of a processor and has to have things schemed so wide open. I've never really seen him capable of making, tight window throws, layered throws, the way that you want your starting quarterback to, but he entices you with the athletic ability. Like that, in that situation, I'd bring him in to compete, to be the bridge guy, but with Geno on the roster, he makes no sense, because I don't think he's a franchise guy moving forward, and so he's not worth taking a shot at.
Agreed. I'm not a Justin Fields believer. And to be honest, I know it's going to sound crazy to some people, I would be more interested in taking Jalen Milroe as a potential prospect this year, and maybe round 2 or round 3, than going the Justin Fields route. I think even though he struggles as a passer, I think there's more to develop there that can be a little bit more. And I think he's a better athlete in some respects.
Yeah.
When we were talking about ownership, IB English says Bezos, maybe. I don't think so. I don't know if Bezos is the right guy. I know he's very interested in the Seahawks, but I don't know if he'll wait it out. One thing I'm going to say, some people brought it up in here. Everyone's on Dylan Gabriel because of the year he's had at Oregon. I am not a Dylan Gabriel fan. I see extreme limitations in his game. His height's not, and people say, oh, well, Russell was short. Russell was a better athlete than Dylan Gabriel by a long shot, and could do things to extend plays that Dylan Gabriel simply can't. Yeah. And I think you saw some of his limitations come to play in this Rose Bowl game versus Ohio State. He can put the ball down the field, but it's not with any real authority to it. And I just, Will Howard in that game, when I was looking at both quarterbacks and doing the evaluation for our show that's coming out, I just don't see it. I don't see the investment there. He reminds me very much, and, he's a shorter version, in my opinion, to Kellen Moore. That's kind of who my comp is for him, is Kellen Moore in a lot of ways, because Kellen Moore coming out into the NFL was a very accomplished college quarterback, high percentage passer and all those things, but didn't have the NFL arm and couldn't ad-lib enough to extend plays. He was an okay backup, but he wasn't someone that you went out of your way to draft high. I think that's kind of Dylan Gabriel's thing. He may be some team's 6th round pick you take a flyer on. I just don't see him being a potential starter in the NFL for a franchise where you see guys like Jackson Dart, Will Howard, Riley Leonard, Jalen Milroe. They all have some sort of trait about them that gives you that hope that they can turn into that starter with some development.
Yeah, if you're going to be 5'10", 5'11", You better have some elite traits, and I don't see that from him. I could be more easily talked into Rattler last year, who was only an inch or two taller, because he could really spin it. Like, he just had a much, much better arm, and he could make some special throws. I just, I just, as a general rule, I don't really want a smaller quarterback again. I want a guy that, when the pocket's collapsing and it's all kind of falling apart, has some of those physical traits where he can just overcome sometimes with those, and that you're not limited or have to find ways to compensate for your weaknesses. And there's some guys in this draft that are going to be available later on who have some of those traits, and that's why I want to take one.
No, and I totally agree with you, Dan. So I just noticed in here a couple of the people, IB English and Mike Old Greasy Smith, because you guys have won items in the giveaway. I'm going to quickly show this on the screen. Here's my email address. Send me your information on where to ship things there. And I will make sure. I know Brendan Myers has already reached out to me through Twitter and sent me his stuff. Please send me your shipping information, and I'll make sure we ship something out to you guys in the coming days or weeks here, and get you guys something. So just make sure you guys copy that down. I will turn it into a ticker so that way it can just run on the bottom of the screen here, guys. And that way you guys can just grab it off of there. What do we got else in here, Dan? Oh, this is interesting. From the Snail, Gannon and Shanahan get fired next year. Ooh, that's an interesting, statement.
Interesting. It is. I do think the Gannon thing would imply that they just, don't have a good season. Maybe they have another 5-6 win season. It's just not happening. And they want to find lightning in a bottle, right? The Shanahan thing, there's more to it than that. Like, there's just kind of a sort of a tone down there right now that's pretty negative.
Yes.
And that can all just be fixed by winning. They went through maybe the best example we've seen in a long time of the Super Bowl hangover, where with the shortened off season and everything else, you got guys hurt and have to have surgeries or whatever, and there's not enough recovery time. And it sets you sort of your clock for the off season behind. Everything that could go wrong seemed to go wrong there. There's some big decisions they have to make on elite players. I'm just not a believer in Kyler Murray when it comes to the Cardinals. And so I think they have a capped ceiling. As long as Shanahan is there, I'll always believe the 49ers can compete, but there's something going on down there. Like, they need to fix. There's some chemistry things happening there they need to fix.
Doesn't that sound very much of what happened to us after our Super Bowl loss? The chemistry got and they're going through it right now. I think there's going to be there's
some me. There's some I need to get paid. And that's not going to slow down anytime soon. They got to pay their quarterback.
So Ryan's off of this, but Jeff Mathis came in with one here. He goes, name 3 QBs that the Hawks should consider from the draft. And should it be first or later rounds? I'm okay with later rounds. Well, what I'll let everyone know is me and Dan will be doing a draft show. It's actually a podcast we're starting. The pick is in all draft all year. It's something for me and Dan that's kind of like a passion project because we're both extreme draft nerds. It is going to be as Dan put it on his show, a global draft show. So it won't be Seahawks specific. If you want our Seahawk draft takes, they will be either on Seahawks Forever, where Dan has his content, or on the HawksZone Rundown with me and Ryan, and we will dive into more specific Seahawks related draft. But we will be doing a deep dive. Dan has the luxury I'm very jealous of, to be going to Senior Bowl in a few weeks and getting to be around these guys. Everyone helped out in getting Dan down there. So I'm going to be extremely jealous of Dan getting to hang around a lot of the quarterbacks that I have that are my 3. But I'll give you my 3, Jeff. I'd be very interested in Jackson Dart, Will Howard, and Kyle McCord if he declares. The other one I don't think would get to the Senior Bowl, but the other guy that I'm sneakily, interested in if he does declare is Drew Allar. He's big on my board, but the 3 guys I think that will be, 2 of them will be at the Senior Bowl is Jackson Dart and Will Howard. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I'm with you on that list. I was going to add, I am intrigued by Milroe just because the athletic, traits are so good, and we've seen moments from him. We've seen flashes of him really like early this season, there was a lot of talk about how he improved his deep ball accuracy and he really had some shots early in the season that seemed to be getting better. I was surprised he came out. I think he could benefit from another year in college, especially under Kalen DeBoer. I think he's coming out too early. He's too raw. You certainly couldn't count on him being a guy that could start for you his first couple of years in the league. But the traits are intriguing, man, and that's something that I would want to take a shot at working with. And then Riley Leonard is interesting in the sense that he's played a ton of football. Physically, he has a lot of traits. None of them are elite. When I'm down on Riley Leonard, I kind of think I'm seeing another Daniel Jones in some aspect. But he's also a guy who's athletic. He can run. He's willing to run. He's accurate. He gets the ball out quick. And like I said, played a lot of football. And then I thought he handled the transfer well. That shows me something, going and learning a new environment, new culture, new scheme, and then winning in that environment, going deep in the playoffs. But he's probably a guy I'd look for on day 3. The other guys on the list that you gave, those are all guys that I'd be completely content with them taking on day 2. And at this point, honestly, acknowledging it's early in the process, still have a lot of film to watch and to see how the evaluation process plays out. Jackson Dart's a guy that I think could elevate to the point that if they really like him and want him and think he could be the future, they might have to take him at 18.
Yeah, no, I think
at the end of the process, he could end up jumping up there.
There's a couple things with Dart for me that make me think that he could get into that late first round, second round kind of quarterback. He's played a lot of ball. He's played at 2 big programs, USC and Ole Miss. He's played against a lot of good talent. Watching him, there's certain quarterbacks I kind of get focused on early on in their college career to be like, hey, this is a guy I'm going to need to pay attention to, because I think coming his draft year, he potentially could be a guy that people are going to, gravitate to. I was very high on Josh Allen. I was very high on Patrick Mahomes in their draft era. And they weren't having successful or greatly successful college teams. They were just really intriguing players to watch. When I look at Jackson Dart, everyone's going to see his game against Duke. Duke had a top 15 collegiate defense this year. He is so calm and so good under pressure. We talk about how bad our O-line is. He is the type of guy that I think still needs to sit and develop, but he can make a lot of the NFL throws. The one throw for me that stood out, I don't know if you saw it, Dan. I know you were watching the game, when he rolled to his left and did the Zach Wilson Pro Day throw.
Yeah. No, you sent it to me. Yeah.
In an NFL game, or a college game, I should say. Not running around in your shorts doing it. He actually stepped up, slid, and threw it to the only point in 2 coverage. Like, he had 2 defenders there and dropped it in. And that's where I look at it and I go, okay, that's a throw that if you can make with the pressure on going away from your strong side and make that throw, there's something about you that's different. Now, I'm not saying Jackson Dart's going to come in and start, and I'm not going to say Jackson Dart's going to be Patrick Mahomes. But like you said, if he's a guy with how he is and the way his teammates love him and everything that I've heard about Jackson Dart, he's a guy I'd be okay if Seattle decided, hey, this could be our guy, and you take that swing. Hey, you took the swing. Sometimes it doesn't work, but at least you had conviction and you took a swing or a bite out of the apple.
Yeah.
It could be very, very intriguing to see who jumps up this draft board going on. So we'll go a couple more minutes here, Dan, and then we'll move on. But here's one from Hawks fan Matt. Are there any reclamation project QBs or ones blocked on depth charts you'd actually be excited about? Mine's Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, I talked about this on the show a couple of days ago. It's hard to find these guys, right? Guys that are blocked. And you keep going back to the history of the Green Bay Packers again and what Schneider learned, and they were able to turn that into an asset because they kept drafting and developing guys behind their starters. They were able to trade backups for draft picks and constantly add to their draft capital.
Yes.
By trading Mark Brunell, Aaron Brooks, Matt Hasselbeck, Ty Detmer. Like, they just kept doing that. I don't know, that seems to have gone by the wayside. When was the last time a team sort of poached a player off another team's roster, and he actually became a really good starter for them. Like, I can't remember the last time. You see a lot of suggestions right now among the fan base. There's some in the comments about Joe Milton because they saw him play one good game today in a meaningless game for the Patriots, and he's got the big arm and all of that. I get that. But there's also, if you go back and look at his college tape, there's tons of red flags and reasons to be concerned that he could ever be a full-time starter. So, yeah, I don't know. They're just, that seems to be sort of a dearth in the league right now of guys like that. You know, there are the guys that have failed and moved on. You know, do you think Zach Wilson can be resurrected? I have no idea. I have no clue.
Yeah, I'm not so sold on the Zach Wilson idea. I know it's kind of the trendy thing now because Geno from the Jets has become a reclamation project to a starter. Sam Darnold's obviously having the success. I don't know if I think Zach Wilson has that in him.
Like, I had people come at me with Trey Lance the last couple of weeks. Did anyone watch him play today?
Hey.
Right? It's
don't bring Trey Lance. I was never high on Trey Lance, but Ian Victor's got one here. I remembered that I made a bold prediction in the comments in one of the videos that there will be a new general manager here within the next year or two. It may happen this year. For example, Pete Carroll being let go. Ian, I don't think John's endangered this offseason. I think they're going to give him this offseason. I think if this team does the exact same thing again that they did this year and they've done for the last 3 years, there will be conversations in 2026's offseason that, maybe John needs to be moved on from and go in a new direction there. But that's where I, would be kind of thinking of it in that regard. Robert from over on your channel, Dan, comes in with, could we get a guy like Deebo Samuel in free agency? Yes, but I would rather see a Deebo type player to fit into this offense, kind of in a way, but more of a polished receiver that can do some of these things, but someone that I'm more comfortable with that can actually add to the offense. I don't see Deebo as he is currently as a addition to this receiving core in any way, because we kind of saw someone that had a similar skill set and it didn't work out with the Eskridge because we didn't know how to use them.
Yeah. And if you want Deebo in free agency, the 49ers are going to have to cut him because he's not on an expiring contract. But I'll say this, that story leaked out a month or so ago. The Seahawks really liked Deebo and were maybe in that draft trying to maneuver to get he and DK. Well, now, if you want to trade for Deebo, first of all, you're going to have to give up some pretty significant capital. Are you comfortable enough with your roster to do that? You're going to have his cap hit is whatever it is. And so are you doing that in lieu of, are you moving off DK? Or are you going to handle both those wide receiver contracts, right? I don't think he makes sense now. And also, I'm not so sure he's a great locker room guy, to be honest. I mean, there's been too many issues of him just kind of being surly with his teammates and also not being available. He gets banged up a lot. Like, that's not where I want to invest my resources.
No, I agree. I'm not a big Deebo get on that bandwagon. Rusty P comes in, says, so not Milton seems like a good fit if he develops. I'm not a big Joe Milton fan. He's got a cannon for an arm. He really does. You could get behind it, but the more I've seen of Milton, the more I went back and deep diving because I was interested in him in last year's, draft, potentially as a late flyer. There's just too many gaps. Very much like Anthony Richardson, not a great completion percentage, not a lot of starts. You'd be spending more in developing him for years and years than really, like, when we're talking about the guys you want to develop, I'm more in the camp of develop a guy that's been a 4 to 5 year starter in college football. Someone that has a lot of starts, 30 plus games, because you're not then developing their work ethic as a starter. If you're taking a guy that was only a 2-year starter in college and then asking him to, that's something that he's still learning how to do, how to be in that process. That's where you look at, some of the guys that have been really successful. Baker Mayfield had a lot of starts in college. Joe Burrow is probably the only exception to the rule I've seen because he only really started the 2 years at LSU. Other than that, he was sitting on the bench at Ohio State. But he was in a big program, which probably helped with that with Urban Meyer, as much as Urban Meyer has his own issues. But a lot of guys that have had success in the NFL once they are guys that have started for 3+ years in college. You see them with their work ethic, how they go about that process. And that's something I always take into account is how many games have you started and against big time competition, not just, FCS level opponents, but
Right.
Snail comes in here with another one, Dan. Jordan Travis from the Jets. I was interested in Jordan Travis last year.
Yeah.
But again,
Here's the thing. I'm the same way. Like, I liked him. He was coming off the injury, obviously, right? And essentially redshirted for the Jets this year. There were things I liked about him, his game, but he was another undersized guy, like not just barely 6 foot, but really slight.
Yeah. Yes.
But I liked his release. I liked his mobility. I liked, he has a lot of tight window throws on his tape. Here's the thing. If you're combing other rosters in the league and you're looking for somebody that's stuck on a depth chart that you think that you might want to acquire to be your franchise quarterback of the future, ask yourself one question. Do I think that guy can be special? Because if not, if the answer is no, then you can draft one just like him on a fresh rookie contract whenever you want to and pay him rookie slot, right? Like, if you think there's someone that's stuck that you think can be elite, then make that move. Those are the kinds of guys we're talking about. But just taking shots on these kind of random players that don't really have obvious starter upside where you kind of have to squint and hope you can develop him. That's the kind of opportunity I'm looking to hit on in the draft, not giving up resources to take them off other people's rosters.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And so Mookie kind of comes in here. An idea that teams are super eager to trade their backup QBs, Milton, is not based in reality. If anything, Milton would just be a QB2 behind May anyway.
Yeah,
agreed.
That's the other side of that argument. If a team has like the Detroit Lions, Hendon Hooker has some great college tape and he's got some traits. He was coming off an injury too. And he's a guy that I liked coming out in his draft as a potential. Well, he was a guy that without the injury probably gets into that late first round conversation there and doesn't fall to the Lions. But Jared Goff's on the other side of 30, right? They want to make sure that they're set up for the future. Hooker's not costing him a lot of money.
Nope.
Why would they want to give up on someone like that when they have an aging quarterback? So, yeah,
agreed.
It's the fantasy football mentality. I wish there was a Matt Hasselbeck out there that we could go grab off someone's roster for what was you, like a 6th round pick trade?
I think he was, yeah, something like that, yeah.
Or I think we swapped firsts
from Matt Hasselbeck. Let's see here,
just for fun. What did it cost?
I'm kind of curious.
It wasn't a lot. It was mostly just shuffling the deck a little bit, but the idea that there just aren't guys like that out there, future starters lying in wait. I think it
no, there's not, and I think that's something that's interesting here. I've got it pulled up here. Let's see what they've got. The first round. That's right. Yeah. So Matt Hasselbeck is acquired in a trade with the Green Bay Packers. The Seahawks switched picks in the first round of that year's NFL draft for the Packers, and also gave up a 3rd round choice in that trade.
Okay. Yeah, those kinds of deals.
That's basically what it was. Which, not at that point, I don't think it was much of a switch in the first round, anyways. Yeah. So that's one. Here's an interesting one. True Drew Sports. How do you guys feel about the center position with Olu, Sundell, and Haynes all competing for the spot?
Better than I felt about it going into last offseason.
Yeah. Seeing Olu play, and he actually showed some progress this year. And again, I don't expect Olu to be a top 10 center, but I think Olu could be a top 20 center, which is an improvement if we have continuity at that position for the first time since Max Unger. Like, if Olu starts the first game, it'll be the first time we've started the same center in back-to-back years.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that you might try to replace him every year, and he's just going to keep playing.
Yeah.
And which was kind of my book on him coming out was I think my profile on him was I didn't really see him ever becoming a Pro Bowl center, at least not a perennial Pro Bowl center, certainly not an All-Pro, but a guy who could start for 10 years in the league. And that's kind of what he's looked like to me. Like he'll have a bad rep or two each game, but he's solid and steady enough that I don't think he's the biggest part of the problem. I think you got to figure out the guard spots. And if Christian Haynes can get more work at center and potentially compete there, that maybe the issue with his frame and his length that they thought was a detriment in his attempt to win either of the guard spots, maybe it's not as big a deal at center, right? I mean, Scott Huff has a history of playing with smaller centers there, and it's not Christian Haynes not small, but you get my point, right? Like he's bigger than Nick Harris was, certainly. He's more similar to how Olu is built. But it's why they liked Bradford and LeMaya better than he at guard, because they're just longer players. He worked at center at the Senior Bowl, got a lot of positive buzz out of it. There was some talk around draft time that he might be drafted by a team that intends to move him to center. I love the idea. And I think Sundell's a really athletic kid and a guy that, was a 4-year starter in college at a high level for an FCF school. And I think you run it back with those three guys. There's centers that we like in the draft, and there's centers certainly that as we watch tape between now and the draft, we'll like that we aren't familiar with right now, but I don't think it's the most glaring need.
No, agreed. And so we got another super chat in here. It tolls for the hypothetical. What about 2018 Geno Smith from the Chargers? What did you think about that guy?
Is he about to make the point that guy's Sam Darnold? Because Geno in 2018, Geno would have been 28.
Yeah, he would have been roughly. I think so.
What's interesting about that year is they played the Seahawks in the preseason that year. And Geno didn't start that game. He came in the second half and just sliced and diced. Was just throwing darts all over the place. And I remember kind of casually watching the game and thinking, who the hell is that? Oh, that's Geno Smith?
Yeah.
Like he was just carving us up. I just remember being blown away by his arm talent in that game and thinking, oh, I had forgotten about that guy.
So here's one from Jason talking about the Haynes thing. Where did this story about Haynes moving to center come from? I haven't heard a word about it before a week ago. Haynes, kind of the thought process at Senior Bowl was he started to get looked at that spot just because of how he's built. He's built more like a traditional NFL center than he is really a guard. And they kind of even in training camp tried him out there a few times, I believe, before they had signed Jalen Sundell as potentially the emergency center in case Connor Williams or Olu had some, injury or that. So that's kind of where that started. And it's kind of ramped up here in the last week or so with them really trying him out there.
Somebody reported, one of the beat reporters
mentioned it,
that they had been working him at center the last couple of weeks.
So, Ian Victor, how would you guys feel if the Seahawks announce black attires with new uniform change if it happens in the future? I don't know if the Seahawks will ever go black. I just don't see it. It's never been something that's been a predominant color for them in a lot of ways, and I don't know if they'd ever go that direction with their jersey. I think it'll be a fun thing that fans may be able to get a purchase of, like some, I've seen a few of them, but I don't know if it'll ever become a true jersey option for the Seahawks.
Yeah, maybe as an alternate. I mean, I always love when teams go black. It just looks badass, right?
Yeah.
So maybe as an alternate, if they make a full change, I think that's what would have to happen, though.
I agree.
For the example we talked about earlier, if they go to the throwbacks full time, maybe they go something a little more extreme with like a black alternate. It might be kind of cool.
Yeah. So with that being said, that's going to wrap it up for tonight for us on the show here. We've been at it for 2 hours now as kind of an end to the Seahawks season and a lot to look forward to in 2025. So Dan, thank you again. You were, a regular throughout the whole process, and I'm sure we'll have you back on throughout the off season as well. But yeah, Dan, do you want to let everyone know what's going on at Seahawks Forever before we touch on our show that we're going to be doing?
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't get a big old head now that you're 1,000 subscribers, and don't have me back on the show. So I'm excited about our new channel. The pick is in. Get over there and subscribe, so we can talk about some draft stuff outside of just Seahawk world. But on Seahawks Forever, I'll be turning my attention to the offseason. Over these next few weeks, getting into roster needs. We'll be focusing on some of those. Kind of where do we sit today and where are the holes. We'll be kind of recapping the season. I talked all season long about checking boxes, how many of those boxes actually got checked and how many left unchecked, and then ramping up for the Senior Bowl and heading down to Mobile in a couple of weeks to be able to see all those top prospects up close and kind of get a feel, especially those quarterbacks. Can't wait to be on the field and see those guys throw and everything that happens throughout the week there. And so, yeah, just onward and upward. This actually, people might not realize this, but channels like ours actually get more views during draft season than they do during the regular season if they keep up with that kind of content, because fans are thirsty for that kind of information and speculation and the hypotheticals. They love that. Whereas during the season, all of us content creators are creating all the content we can, and there's a lot more out there, and not as many people are sickos about it like us.
This is very true.
We're going to lean into that, and hope you all will join us for the ride.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So, guys, I'll just echo what Dan's saying. Go over to the Pick Is In. Our first show, actually, we're going to be doing a 3-round NFL mock draft, entire NFL. And that'll be, is it Saturday, Dan? We're doing it Jan 11th, I think is what we decided on. 12 o'clock.
Yeah. Yep.
So next Saturday, 12 o'clock live, we will be doing a live NFL mock draft on the Pick Is In. So if you guys are asking, wondering when we're going to get our first show up, that'll be our first show. It'll be a 3-round mock because neither one of us has had the chance yet to fully dive into this draft class and get on that. And then Dan and me will be creating a big board. That's one of the things that we're going to be working on. So pretty exciting stuff we got going on over there. And obviously Dan going down to the Senior Bowl is going to give us some great insight on that channel. Over here on the HawksZone Rundown, again, thank you everybody for helping us get to 1,000 subscribers. That's huge for us. We've done it in a year, which is pretty remarkable for us because me and Ryan basically started from nothing. So we really appreciate all the support and everything you guys have given us. We will be doing a membership program. That'll be something we're going to be starting up, but a couple episodes we got coming up. So we got Brandon Kane from the Hawk Nest coming on tomorrow for a live show at 4:30. We're going to break down with with Brandon, everything that kind of his opinions on this team, the season, what are his thoughts on the offseason and where it's going to go for the Seahawks. And maybe we'll have potentially some news to talk about, even whether it's throughout the NFL as a whole. And then we will be doing a show with Rob Staten on Sunday. We'll be doing a live show with Rob Staten. So for our subscribers and that out there, come on to that one. You'll be able to ask Rob some questions as well and get his insight. Basically, it's going to kind of be this next week or so, guys, is going to be a recap of everything and what we predict could happen this offseason. And who knows, Dan, maybe we'll have some news to talk about it there. So, but that's it for tonight. And thank you again, everyone, for being in the chat, being so, appropriate in it as well. And for everyone that got a giveaway, please reach out to me through email or on Twitter, and we'll make sure to get you guys a Seahawks Forever, I should say HawksZone Rundown hat. And we'll get you guys all set up with your giveaway gifts. So again, guys, this is the end of the 2025 season. But Dan, like you said, onwards and upwards. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.